Всем добрый день.
Hello, everyone. Today, we are beginning, well, already 3 minutes past 5, so we already let in everybody who came, and I hope some people will be joining us later. The organizers will let them in for our webinar, so we are beginning our webinar. How to decrease the costs out, and to add value in. How to generate the sustainable economy during the post-COVID epoch. How can we constantly generate savings and values for our company during the era of post-COVID or even COVID so far?
Так,
Okay.
у нас переводчики переводят.
Does the interpretation work? Yes, the interpretation is working. Okay. Sorry, I don't hear because I am in the different channel. So this is the 5th meeting which we are conducting together with our partners. I will introduce myself. My name is Marina Trepova. I am the co-owner and the managing partner of the company of IPSM, which provides the services in the sphere of procurement and supply chain in Ukraine and other countries. We are dealing with popularization of the topic of procurement, the supply chain, sustainable development of procurement, ethical procurement, and also we provide the services of consulting, training, and educational kind of training, workshops, and seminars, which you are visiting today in particular. Also, we are providing services on outsourcing of services of procurement and supply chain. Today, it is the 5th webinar. Before a little pause, which everybody is taking for the holiday, and then we will go on with our webinars in September. As I already mentioned, we are conducting those webinars together with our partners, the company of Procurement Central, and with Stephen Wills. I do remind you, whoever didn't visit our webinars, the aim is to share our experience with the colleagues from different countries, from Ukraine and from the United Kingdom. That is why the speakers today are from Ukraine and from the United Kingdom. I'm now giving the floor to Stephen, and a bit later, I will introduce the speakers from Ukraine. Steve, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marina, and welcome to our 5th East Meets West International Forum. Just a bit about Procurement Central. We run events, training and consultancy in cost management across supply chain and procurement, and we power up procurement by adding value. At the heart of what we do is spend management, ensuring costs are managed, controlled, and sustainably reduced. This means we're not price cutters. Anyone can buy cheap. That is not responsible procurement. Procurement Central focus on managing the total cost of ownership without any detriment to quality. As Marina said, the pandemic has hit companies hard, and procurement must now lead the recovery by creating additional profit for the business through cost reduction programs. I would say that cost savings are the oxygen of companies led by procurement. I'm pleased to have procurement experts joining us today, like my colleague Debbie Sorrell, there she is, who have run cost reduction programs across different sectors. I also welcome our first speaker, Malcolm Smith. Little wave, Malcolm. There we are. An impressive senior procurement practitioner with a background in pharmaceuticals, including Glaxo, Rhône-Poulenc, and Aventis Pharma. Malcolm has consistently delivered between 25 to 30% cost reductions in his cost out programs. Included in that is breaking third-party technology monopolies that reduced costs by 26% and lead time by 80%, delivering a 33% cost reduction on print and packaging by consolidating 18 suppliers to 2 and breaking local sourcing across 12 manufacturing plants to act as 1. And recently, most recently, Malcolm addressed the marketing spend for the largest UK estate agent or real estate agent, achieving over 30% cost reduction using a complex approach to destabilize an entrenched supplier. We'll hear from Malcolm in a moment. Let me also welcome Jonny Michael. Jonny studied economics before qualifying as a chartered accountant, and he's previously been head of corporate finance and a managing director. I think that it's probably easier, Jonny, if I now hand over to you and you can conclude your own introduction, as it were, and then start the presentation with Malcolm. So, Jonny, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Steve, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Jonny Michael. I'm Chief Executive of JMCL Consulting, and we are a specialist cost reduction consultancy. We're based in Manchester, England, home of football, and we operate globally. We collaborate closely with Steve and Procurement Central, and we've been established for over 30 years. Our methodology is called enlightened procurement, and that means a few things, but predominantly we are paid out of our savings, so that unless we deliver savings, we don't get paid. So we are prepared to commit ourselves and take the risk. However, we don't do it at any cost. As Steve mentioned earlier, it's service and quality that are important as well. So we look at the whole business, not just the individual cost category that we are reducing. Another aspect is that we look to build very long-term relationships with the companies that we work for. And you don't get that by just cutting costs without taking into account the whole of the business and their long-term future. Our clients include global businesses, as well as family-run businesses, and even some startups. And Malcolm will talk to you about some case studies. We do a lot of work with private equity-backed businesses where they need to reduce costs quickly. So I'm delighted to introduce Malcolm in a moment, and Malcolm will talk about some real-life case studies from our consultancy. I hope you enjoy them. Thank you very much and have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much, Jonny. That was a handover to me, was it? Very good. Thank you. I'm going to pull some slides up onto the screen now. Hopefully this will all work for us. And it'd be great to get a bit of feedback to just know that everyone can see them. Believe that that's the case. Thumbs up from everyone. Can you see these slides? Yep. Great, good, lovely. Thanks ever so much. So now there we go. Very good. So so thanks, Jonny. We, as has been said, we are very much an organisation focused on adding value in addition to cost out. So we really seize the opportunity here to talk about what that looks like in a post-COVID world, and to see about the applicability of some of our approaches and methods, the real how we go about delivering enlightened procurement, the cost out and value in services that we provide. and how that works, how that is likely to work into the environment that we're all looking at now. So by way of the content of what I'm going to be talking about, a little bit of context, I'm going to introduce a concept also, creativity, and how JMCL relies on creativity to consider the environment that we're working in and to find the best solutions that deliver the best cost out and the best sustainable value up. I'm going to talk a little bit about recycling and not reinventing, a little bit more creativity, a lot on disruptive behavior, and then I shall share some of the case studies that we insights into case studies that we've got that show basically showcase our creativity and also showcase our use of tools. So moving on then, so what is different then in this post-COVID world that we're looking at? Well, for a start, the market dynamics. There are winners and losers everywhere. I'm sure we can all we can all cite them. We know around the world that the hospitality market has been a big loser. But recruitment now back into that market as they're trying to reboot, I'm sure around the world, is creating wage inflation, which I'll come on to again in a minute. But there have also been a lot of winners. A lot of organisations have made a real success out of this COVID situation we've been in, and that's likely to continue at least for the next couple of years until the world rebalances. I mean, we know from our work in the bicycles business, which is one of the case studies we'll talk about shortly, that the cycle trade around the world, bringing in bicycles from low-cost countries into Europe, has been well, very trying. There's huge demand for bicycles at the moment, which really shows that bike retailers, bike manufacturers, and all associated supply chains are winners in this, albeit that they are struggling themselves to provide. And then, of course, the organisations required to distribute the bikes around the world are also winners, and again driving some wage inflation to an extent. And I'm sure we can all cite different winners and losers that we're going to be looking at in this as the world starts to restabilize and come out of the pandemic. We are going to be looking at more wage inflation. There are expectations in certain sectors in the UK and across Europe at the moment, and from what I can understand in the States too, where wage inflation is being driven by a drive to get people back to work and skills shortages. Also, there are going to be countries where government has supported jobs with a furlough scheme, as it's called in the UK, which protects people's jobs and wages. That's ending shortly, and we're likely to see a big spike in unemployment in certain sectors. We're also dealing with Brexit, as well, as I'm sure people are aware, and that's also led to substantially new ways of working. And the fact we're doing this now, we're not together, is a prime example of that. But also the fact that we are going to have to find ways of being creative, delivering our value and cost reduction without necessarily having the ability to travel as much as we used to in the past. So what all of that boils down to is we've got to look at cost out, value up in a new way, really post-creative. That's post-COVID. Sorry, that's not to say we're throwing out our old skills and experiences, but we need to employ them in different ways. And as Jonny had said in his introduction there, the way JMCL works is to look at unprecedented customer and supplier cost reduction combined concurrently with customer value and supplier value up, which is the sweet spot that we always aim to hit, which is enlightened procurement. And to pick up on what Steve was saying at the very beginning in his introduction, that we're looking at sustainable savings, because we all know that unless a cost reduction program is accompanied by at least maintained service and quality, it won't last for very long. And the fact is JMCL get paid from savings. So unless we deliver supreme concurrent value along with the cost out, we won't get paid. So that's at the forefront of our minds in doing our particular projects. So to get into this concept of creativity, I wanted to just introduce a gentleman called Edward de Bono, who developed a lot of thinking tools to give us new insights. Now, there were two particularly famous ones I'm sure everyone's heard of, lateral thinking being one, which requires that people who are stuck in a furrow use some trick to direct their thinking in a different direction about a particular solution, about a particular problem. And then six thinking hats, a very famous and visual technique that he came up with to help people to think differently about problems and solutions. Now, the reason for mentioning this is because JMCL uses a lot of classic business and procurement tools as triggers. They are really great triggers to help us think creatively and differently and to find creative solutions about the problems that we're dealing with, albeit that at face value, a lot of these tools have become so ingrained in us that people don't take them as seriously anymore as they should do. Or as we get more senior, you lose sight of them and the value that they can bring. So there's a bit of a health warning along with this, which is never allow the simplicity of a tool or our over familiarity with it to undermine its effectiveness or ability to be powerful in our coming up with creative solutions. So just to skip through some of the tools that JMCL uses on a regular and frequent basis. Yes, we're all familiar with good old Kraljic box. Now, what the use that JMCL applies to that regularly and frequently is the fact that it allows us to constantly consider the balancing of value or value of spend and the associated risk of supply. Two dimensions that play into almost all of our thinking and allow us to consider new approaches and strategies to deliver value for clients. We also use the flip side of that, which is to consider the way that suppliers look at us or the market environments that we're trying to deliver our procurements in. And again, I'm sure everyone has seen that type of model before again, but we find it extremely useful on a day-to-day basis, as you will see in some of the case studies I talk about shortly. We also reach back to the early noughties when Andrew Cox brought the concept of power into the procurement world, and leaning on Porter's 5 forces there and market rivalry and bargaining power and substitutes, and what does power mean and what do power regimes give us in coming up with effective solutions to deliver value up, cost out in demanding environments. And I suppose the footer for all of that is about getting leverage, helping us to think about how to get some sort of leverage to deliver a sustainable program in our world. In putting these slides together, I was also reminded of a great piece of work out of INSEAD a few years ago called Blue Ocean Strategy, where they were looking at new businesses and creating new businesses. And one of the tools that JMCL uses is one where we use, it's a framework developed in INSEAD, as you can see on the screen here, which was about developing new markets. What JMCL uses it for is to force ourselves to think about redefining the way we are looking at a particular problem, a particular marketplace that we're trying to do some sourcing in. And again, you'll see references to that and nods to that regularly and frequently in the case studies that we're going to be addressing here. I mean, I think that there's a particular one of these concepts in here that rears its head pretty much across all of the case studies, and perhaps we could have a discussion about that when we get to the end of the presentation in questions. We also look to be creative when we're thinking about inside of organizations, and again, everybody's familiar with stakeholder mapping, but we use it to understand in detail the the nature of the characters that we're having to deal with, that we have to communicate with and influence to be able to develop enablers to support our projects and to mitigate damage that can be done by people who are not on side with us with respect to what we're wanting to do. Simple tools, but they are crucial in our pack. The key thing is how we use them. And that plays really to coming back to good old Kraljic again, and using a tool to think carefully about where you want a supply position to get to, and therefore the tools that you need to, and the methods you need to apply to move from one of the boxes to another. A very simple tool that we use is around reduce, create, raise, and eliminate, around creating new opportunity curves for us to consider segmenting any particular problem and considering it in terms of what is not actually adding value, which we need to reduce our effort in, where can we add more value, which is around the creative stuff, what do we entirely eliminate from the situation, and where do we need to raise the game in the environment that we're particularly working in. So this is all about being disruptive. It's about finding an angle that we can then work on to deliver what it is that is the focus of any particular cost out, value up initiative we happen to be working on. So that's really just a bit of a background to say JMCL uses classic tools very carefully and very well to deliver the outcomes. We don't see them as being old hat or old school tools that no longer have any relevance to us. They are absolutely on the money. We believe that we've developed clever ways of using them to get to where we want to get a particular project to. So there are 4 case studies I'd like to share with you now where we have deployed these particular tools to great effect. Steve referenced a number of them in the introduction. 2 of which relate to pharmaceutical industry, 1 of which relates to the UK's largest property estate agency, and then there's a project we're just concluding at the moment, which is in retail in the UK, and that was around the procurement of courier services. So looking at the Rhone-Poulenc-Rohrer situation, the pre-sterilized syringes, please just allow me to set the scene with this one. Pre-sterilized syringes sound a bit dull. They're absolutely a critical part of saving lives, the way the drugs are delivered. Syringes need to be sterilized, and when drugs are being developed, you either invest in a sterilization plant yourself, or you buy in syringes that have been previously sterilized. If you use bought-in pre-sterilized syringes, they then get registered in drug master files of the medicines agencies around the world. Once a product is registered in a drug master file, however good you are at procurement, it's very difficult to gain any leverage with respect to the supplier of that, because they know you're not going to go revisiting regulations. I was responsible for buying these on a worldwide basis. We had about 40–50 million pound spend on them, and I was being tasked with significant cost reductions. I had to find some leverage. So in terms of the creative thinking there, I had to get extremely creative, because we didn't have the budget to introduce genuine competition into the marketplace. We weren't going to invest in pre-qualifying any other suppliers. There was a possibility that we could have built new sterilization ourselves, but that had to be, but that was a 3 to 5 year project in terms of budgeting, albeit that it practically wasn't going to take that long. So we reimagined the procurement team as being excellent communicators and influencers rather than buyers. So we saw ourselves then as having to develop a perception to the suppliers, imagining that diagram, that tool where we looked at the way suppliers see us, we had to get the suppliers to see us as something other than a situation to be exploited. And the way we had to do that was to get them fearful of losing the business. The only way of doing that was to make them believe that there was a genuine alternative. And the way we did that was through an extremely smart, clever engagement and communications program internally involving site and board management of the organization, to create the perception that we were actually building our own sterilization suite. There's a lot of detail in that, there's a lot of planning in that, there's a lot of communication. We had to keep the people who knew really what was going on down to a tight number, but seeing ourselves as great communicators and influencers, we were able to do that. So that was the creative piece, was repositioning us and reimagining ourselves, instead of being buyers, as being great communicators. In fulfilling this particular initiative, which didn't require any other investment, we were able to persuade the suppliers that we were not the beast to be exploited that they saw us to be, but to be a customer that should be developed and nurtured. So we repositioned them in that particular tool through effective communication and persuasion and influence to make them believe that we did have an alternative going forward to their products. As a result of which, we took 15% out of that, the costs from that particular technology monopoly, without having to invest in alternatives, merely in a massive communications program. With respect to pan-European packaging, there's a slightly different situation here. We had 26 different factories across Europe, all using different packaging suppliers. These are packaging that you'll see your pharmaceuticals being delivered in. Everybody believed that they had the best local supplier of printed boxes, for example, and they were defending those to the absolute hilt. They didn't believe that a single provider could come in and take the business on a more creative basis. So we ended up doing influencing, but a tender exercise to establish where price points could be. It didn't look very promising when we were just trying to rejiggle the business around Europe. So we looked at that blue ocean strategy table there, and looked. And one of the instructions that gives us is to look at different sectors for inspiration and innovation. We looked at the motor industry there, whereby you're getting high value parts manufactured in Japan for Japanese cars, for example, and then assembled locally in local environments. The packaging supplier that we identified came forward with an idea of building a brand new factory and putting the heaviest investment into the best technology for the print part of packaging, which is the most expensive, the most complex, and the most wasteful aspect of the process, which is normally done at a very local level to factories, by the way. So that was a massive transformational change in approach. And then shipping the sheets around the country into the local factories, where the manufacturer built or installed gluing machines and folding machines for us. So all of the final bits of the process were basically done close to the production line there, which took a huge amount of, well, it meant we got amazing cost reduction from mass printing in the first instance. We got agility through local folding and gluing, which is something had never been done before. Yeah, we absolutely, well, we took nearly 50% of the purchase price out of that project, and then added a lot of value add, which I'll come on to again in a moment. So that was using creativity to take an idea from a different sector and bring it into into a new environment, which is a really smart angle that we use there, but using these tools again that we bring out time and again. With respect to countrywide properties, that they were spending an awful lot of money on photography, but that spend was devolved down to 1,000, just under 1,000 different retail so agency units that you see on the high street. They all bought in their own photography. There was one provider in the marketplace that had about a third of the spend, but the rest of it was very dispersed. Felt that they were bulletproof. The approach that we took here again, it was we went back to the seeing ourselves as influencers and communicators, and we're able to educate the director of marketing at this client to play along with us to create an environment where the provider believed we were able to move away from them into a different technology, and were prepared to do so. There was a lot of, I wouldn't say it was deceitful, but it was certainly very clever and carefully orchestrated communication to create that environment. And from that, we took depending upon the products that we were looking at, between 30 and 50% out of the cost, but added a lot of value as well, which I'll come on to again in a moment. And the last case study here was has really relied, it was to do with the escalating cost of couriers in distributing bikes and cycling products around the UK. Courier costs have been going through the roof, and in fact, during this process, we met one courier who said, "This is the first time in my whole career that that couriers, it's a seller's market for couriers." I think prior to today, post-COVID, they had been always forced down the price reduction routes, highly competitive markets. He's now saying it's a seller's market. So we went in to support 70 different retail brands in the UK to buy their courier services, which the big innovation there in terms of influencing the retailers to come on board was getting them to change their perspective. They'd always taken a view on buying couriers as a micro local decision. We were able to escalate it up to an aggregated position, so that instead of going to the market with hundreds of thousands or maybe a few £1 million worth of business themselves, we were many tens of millions of pounds worth of business, which got the interest of the courier sector. But it opened the eyes of the retailers to what could be achieved by taking a slightly different approach, which is the aggregation. I mean, net result of which, we're just concluding the project at the moment, but it looks as though we're going to be pulling out, well, in certain cases, 75% of their courier costs, which is quite a staggering achievement. But as you'll see now, we're leaving them in a much better and sustainable place because of the value that we're bringing to the party. So these 4 case studies, in addition to delivering huge cost reductions by thinking creatively and using the tools that we neglect sometimes, but that JMCL bring to the party time and time again, but use very smartly. On the pre-sterilized syringes, we took lead time from weeks down to hours. We virtually eliminated inventory levels. From a risk management point of view, we were able to deliver multi-site supply, and we also got access to a lot more innovation. So whilst we were being measured by top management in terms of cost reduction, the local operating sites that had to fill the syringes saw us as bringing great value to the party because of the flexibility, risk management and innovation that we were able to introduce, that they never felt that they had access to. With respect to the European packaging, I mean, waste and emissions, eliminating inventory were the impact of what we did by having the centralized mass printing, high value part of the process, leading edge equipment, and the low-tech finishing and customization for particular packaging markets at a local level eliminated waste essentially from the factories, which was a huge win. Plus, it was costing us far less to move sheets of material around the country rather than or around Europe rather than finished boxes. Countrywide properties. I mean, it was the value add was incredible. Not necessarily appreciated maybe as much as it should have been by top management, but local. But the marketing team absolutely felt it was a great thing. The DBS checks, for those that don't know, are checks on for criminal records from people who are going to be going into a domestic environment. So tradesmen going into a domestic environment. The photographers that are used nationwide, none of them were being DBS checked by any of the providers until we came along. So that was a massive win, big risk that was previously not seen as a risk that we eliminated on behalf of the client. Service credits, contract management, great visibility through reporting, access to innovation and new technology, huge value add in, and that whole relationship 3 years down the road is going from strength to strength. And then with respect to the couriers project now, again, overarching contract management support innovation into, I mean, it doesn't sound that innovative, but rest assured it is. Even having delivery people assemble bikes for customers is something now that is on the table with respect to the providers we're talking about at a transformed cost point. So all of these case studies, I think, really hit that sweet spot that JMCL and working with Procurement Central is all about. It's that enlightened procurement space where you can deliver a sustainable cost by delivering incredible value up and quality improvements concurrently. Now, I think that's where I wanted to get to in terms of the case studies and reminding people to not lose sight of the great tools that we've been taught to use as in our professional careers, but to maybe get them out, polish them off, and use them in new and creative ways. So on that note, I think we're in for questions, or we're going to take questions later on.
Yep, absolutely, Malcolm. So thank you for that. And I'm going to jump in with my very own question just before we open the floor. And you took us through some models, and you mentioned our dear friend Andrew Cox. And I just want to ask you and get your opinion on influencing our stakeholders, because in my introduction for you, there was a quote which took local sourcing across 12 manufacturing plants to act as one. And I guess that kind of made me think, about how we influence people in our own organization to act as one, because we've got many people who might undermine us. They might be talking to suppliers, different suppliers, different people in the supply chain. And I guess, facilitating our own business and using some of the models that you were talking about can help us to corral people, to, we sometimes say herd cats, but to sometimes lead the business as one, to make sure that everybody is on message, and that we're not going to, shall we say, have the carpet pulled from under us in a particularly, when we're making change or we're going through a negotiation. I sometimes say that negotiating with a supplier can be challenging, but negotiating with the business can be almost impossible. I'd just like your thoughts about that.
Great, thanks, Steve. Yeah, the whole internal influence bit and getting people on your side and minimizing damage that people who are not on your side is absolutely crucial. Yeah, and there are so many ways that we can both win and fail at doing that. Not analysing who might be an influencer or decision maker effectively in the very first instance is really it's the death knell to any project really, and that's not always easy. I mean often that requires a lot of careful analysis, careful conversations with people, which all gets a little bit political if you're not careful. And but then Bill, which a lot of that the care that you take then builds relationships. So the crucial, I'd say the crucial things that have, let's say, delivered success in that printed packaging initiative. One of which was I did find myself building. I deliberately went out of the way to build both bottom up and top down relationships. So that the people on the shop floor who would be affected by the initiative, people in production, people in procurement, people in the warehousing, whatever, I made sure that they got invested in me and believed me. So I built credibility and had rapport with them, which is an investment in itself. That doesn't happen overnight. You have to deliver, and if you deliver and show yourself to be caring of listen to their needs, then that goes some way to helping get them on side with your ideas, albeit they might still be invested in the existing, in a no change outcome.
Yeah.
But then, of course, getting the top management on the site as well require. I mean, that's also crucial, because they'd have to ultimately sign off, or they're the ones that could damage you by talking to board members of the in that corporate structure that I was on, and or having to work within. Now that was a challenge in itself, because you have to take a deep breath. You have to change your mindset from an operational perspective to a strategic perspective. So we need that agility in our abilities. So to be able to sell the potential benefits of these new ideas to those senior guys and get them on board to then at least keep a lid on the bad influence that will be coming through. So selling what's in it for them is a crucial piece of policy. Now, the best trick that I had though, Steve, was as you know, but everyone else doesn't, I'm a passionate racing cyclist, and the worst, most senior customer or internal client I ever had, I invited him to a meeting in my office. I'd taken a deep to really have it out with him over this particular project. He came into my office, spotted a photograph of me in a bike race. We spent half an hour talking about cycling, 10 minutes sorting out the problem. And I would never say we were actually best friends after that, but we certainly had a rapport.
Common ground.
Yeah, there was a bit of common ground there. Yeah. But I think the key thing is though building credibility by doing what you say you're going to do, meeting your timelines, acting professionally, and presenting sound, well-reasoned arguments.
Excellent. Debbie, can I just bring you in at this point, and then I think I'm going to hand back to Marina. So Debbie, please.
Yeah, Malcolm, I just put a comment, really a sort of question comment in the chat. Just really big packaging issue. You know, I think with what's happened, you know, since COVID and the huge, you know, increase on online shopping and that kind of thing, packaging is becoming a massive issue. You know, I'm sure we've all had the tiny thing delivered in the huge box, which isn't sustainable either commercially or environmentally. And I was just thinking that could be, you know, a big opportunity for procurement. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, Debbie. I think I think it's the nature of the. I think there's a lot of design opportunity. Having just done this courier project and understanding the cost of space for moving space around, we need to fill that space and we need to protect product. So the size of packaging, whilst it's a visible issue that we think, oh, that's not sustainable, and it is personally objectionable in many cases when you see the scale of it. But I think the innovation though should be really into materials recycling and making sure that packaging is being designed to be recycled, recycled, and to consume far less material per meter of packaging than it currently does. As you say, it's difficult to see a way around use of it at the moment, and that's consumer habits that are driving that now. But certainly materials and design is a crucial way of helping that particular agenda.
It just seems like, we've spent a long time in packaging procurement, designing stuff so that we don't ship air and so that every centimetre is used, and we have all these, Smarties redesigned their tube from round into, hexagonal so that it could stack and things like that. And yet all that seems to have gone out of the window recently, because you've got what presumably is a guy in a warehouse just using any box that he happens to have there. So yeah, it's just a thought really, but I think it is going to be an issue.
Yeah, there is no doubt about it that it is going to be an issue. And I think that the example, you triggered a thought there, Debbie, as well. I mean, the example from the courier project they were doing at the moment and this is for bigger packaging, not so much small cartons and bags, but for bike boxes, wheel boxes, the large boxes that have to be rigid, and there are two of the organizations who are in the latter stages of this particular initiative that are genuinely talking about delivering, bringing the packaging away from them, just dealing with it responsibly, and then even adding the value of building the bikes in people's houses for them. So it's I think it's perhaps how we use it and how we design it and what we make it from. I think that's got to be the strategic opportunity for packaging in the near future. It's difficult without major cultural change to see it being eliminated as a byproduct of moving stuff around.
Okay, thanks very much, Malcolm and Jonny, for our first presentation. That was excellent. And hand back now to Marina, please.
Thank you so much for this speech, Malcolm. That was rather interesting. And before I announce our next speaker, Oleksandra Shekhovtsova, I would like to ask the question, who used to be the initiator of all of those optimization projects? Were those the buyers, the procurers, or maybe internal customers? Maybe this was the supervisory board decision, or was it the initiative of the owner? How did it take place, in fact? So did all of those cases really, the procurement brought that value which you mentioned and initiated different and various innovative projects?
Great question, Marina. Thank you for that. It is a mixture of a number of different origins of those particular projects. The packaging project was there was a requirement. The company I was working for at the time, Raiffeisen, was merging with a big German pharmaceutical company called Herbst to become what then became the world's largest pharmaceutical company. So there was a requirement to deliver merger synergies, and so all executives had a target imposed on them. So that gave procurement a great platform to then go out and be almost welcomed into the business. Some of the more radical ideas, such as the one I presented then, had more of a soft landing as such than they would had they not come in a change environment as such. But all of the initiatives though came out of procurement, and procurement being driven to deliver cost reduction, but knowing that without value up and cost, without service and quality going up, the cost savings would be non-sustainable.
Дуже гарні приклади.
Rather interesting cases, and it's nice that the procurement were the initiators, because we have something to learn now and what to show to our listeners. Thank you so much. So you may stop sharing your screen now. Thank you, Malcolm. And I'm happily introducing now my colleague, Oleksandra Shekhovtsova, who is a very professional with the capital letter P, because we have cooperated with Oleksandra within the initiatives on the Club of Procurement Directors, and we discussed lots of various leading and forthcoming initiatives and technologies which can be used. Oleksandra has a huge experience of work in the Bank of Raiffeisen in Kiev. And now, after a long way, Oleksandra is taking the position of the head of procurement department in this bank. There was also some episodic work in Philip Morris, right, Oleksandra? So I invited Oleksandra to share her experience how we can provide this value in the work of the buyers, and to show the business that really we are able to do that we are not only conducting transactional activities and not only showing the savings, conducting tender procedures and sourcing process, but also altogether in all of the activities of the procurement departments and function. Oleksandra, the floor is yours, please. Marina, thank you so much for such an introduction. I would like to welcome all of you in my own language, but taking into consideration that my brain is more Russian speaking, knowing my Russian language education, to be more precise with my terminology, I will be speaking Russian. But of course, for the Ukrainian language questions, I will answer in Ukrainian. So, Marina, it was very pleasant to hear such an introduction. My name is Oleksandra Shekhovtsova. I'm the director of the procurement department in Raiffeisen Bank Aval. In the procurement, I am working since 2009. My experience is in two organizations and the company of Philip Morris. I'm really grateful for them because they definitely gave me the culture of transparency, and they also showed that the role of procurement in the organization can be diverse. They created the bigger picture in my mind. But my main experience, my rise and fall and transformation and the developing in the procurement was in Raiffeisen Bank Ukraine, and the function of our bank exists for about 15 years. I've seen how it has been transformed from such dinosaurs when the applications for procurement were drawn on the A4 sheets of paper, and the transformation to the current state when now we have become automated in everything, beginning with sourcing, the platform for tender procedures, ending with the automated digital base of voting of the tender committee, the virtual one. We also installed the category management, embedded and implemented so-called vendor management. So the program of assessment and interaction with our suppliers, we centralized all of the categories and we gathered and consolidated the volumes, and now we are more, in the eyes of the organization, are like business partners of our stakeholders than just people who are bringing something, supplying something, providing something, and that's it. So now I would like to speak about the value of procurement, because this is about savings. As the first association, the buyer is equal to savings. He's saving the money of the bank, or is it something more? Is it beyond? And I'd like to discuss the topic, how we are perceived by our main stakeholders, what our values are, and what we should focus upon in our resources. So let us begin, let us commence this journey, starting this issue. Let us begin with the definition. What's the function of ours as the buyers, who we contact with? Undoubtedly, those are our internal customers, those are stakeholders, initiators of the procurement, and also our sponsors, top management, the management, the boards of directors in the organizations, and our controllers, compliance service, internal security, auditors, depending on which organizational structure your company has. And undoubtedly, the external important component are our vendors or suppliers, because we are not only working for the participants of the process within the organization, but we need to be the link between the company and the external market. So what are their expectations? All of all of the participants of the process connected with the procurement, which contact to this or that extent, in this or that function or role with the procurement department in the organization. It seems to me that when we define their expectations, with this formula, we can find the value of procurement, what it looks like. Undoubtedly, we should begin with savings. This is the first association, which is the basic hygienic association which any company has or any stakeholder has with the organization of procurement. Besides that, I think that our vendors and suppliers expect from us the creation of the long-term strategic and successful interaction or partnership stories. Our stakeholders are getting more and more rapid. Speed, quality, our expertise, all of that together could be named efficiency of the project from the perspective of how we provide procurement. Undoubtedly, our controllers, and I would even say the society, is expecting transparency from us. Whether you have experience, whether you operate in the commercial procurement or in the public ones, to this or that extent, you are the responsible organizer of the process for the provision of transparency, integrity, and all of the main principles, compliance, which exist all over the world. And what we are frankly saying, I think that each organization was not thinking that much about that, but taking into account the latest challenge as the circumstances of COVID, this is the risk management, what we all are focused upon and concentrated upon during the last 18 months. So, from the perspective of my own experience and how we are living as a team of procurement in Raiffeisen Bank, these are the key values of procurement. Then let us look at each of them in more details to understand how we can generate this value in the more efficient way, how we can develop it and raise it. So it would be logical to begin with the savings and how to increase the efficiency in this sphere for us as the buyers. So first of all, what I'd like to say, and here I always remember my husband who says me, the rich one is not who earns a lot, but the one who does not spend much. It does not help me in daily life, but this is the easiest and efficient way to challenge yourself, the organization, your internal customer, whether you really have such a need which generates the costs for the organization. As one of the cases, maybe I could name in my organization a trivial case on the procurement of souvenirs for another event, when we had the marketing department coming to us and they told us that they would like to purchase some souvenirs. We said, guys, let us look what we have. And we found out that for the bank, the warehouses is a bit of a different essence, and we as the procurement department are a bit split from it. We don't manage the stocks, but still, we coordinated our actions with the general services team. We looked at their stocks and we understood when we had the souvenirs big batches procured, we could configure nice sets for the event, and this need was covered. There was no need to procure new souvenirs. This is the example of a very operational character, but in fact, the cost avoidance is the component which is really well working in the big and high budget projects. That is why we should challenge ourselves and the internal customer, understanding whether this is the very complicated configuration, whether there is such a need in the office, whether we can simplify it, whether we can monitor it, how it may impact the cost, the price. The next point I'd like to speak about is the negotiations as one of the most important and most comprehensive leverage to achieve savings. Of course, you need to get prepared to the negotiations, and I would say the least efficient way for me, as we as the procurement team are not practicing at all, this is just coming and asking for discount. It seems to me that the mature function of procurement is communicating with the market at a different level. And as an alternative, just come and ask for a discount. You can offer so-called more fundamental preparation for the process and search in the costs of your own vendor, the one who provides the commercial application. We should find the potential or the perspectives to decrease the costs of the vendor. The cases from the practice. I had rather interesting negotiations with a consulting firm, and out of the big four, which we came to with one of the projects, we needed to develop certain consulting, and the situation looked in the following way. We looked at all of the big four. We selected the company with the lowest price because they are the same league of players and they all offered relevant products. Still, there was such a request to do everything possible for the procurement, everything necessary from the procurement to decrease the price. And undoubtedly, when you begin the negotiations with the highly professional companies at this market, just to come and ask for a discount is the way nowhere. It is a dead-end way. So what did we do? We organized a round table with them. We looked at we, as the procurement department, were the experts here and said, dear colleagues, let us look and search for the zones which we need to reconfigure and which of them we should work upon additionally. The offer was on the experts, consisted of the price of the project per hour of an expert involved in the team and on the volume of those hours necessary for each of the blocks and subtasks of our main task. So we could see that the rate for consultancy per hour of each of the experts was lower than all the others. So just to say that the rate of the expert was not competitive was impossible. It was not applicable. So we saw that in the separate blocks, in some of the companies of the big four, they gave fewer hours for the development of the case. So what we began to challenge in our potential vendor is the strengthening of the team, the relocation of the experts, because we can see that the market practice witnesses that this task can be done quicker. So when the highly professional way of negotiations took place, when we referred to their partners at the market with the same expertise they had, with the detailization, really the company was very open to hear us, and altogether additional 18% of the project, which was a highly budgeted project, we saved thanks to the negotiations conducted in this style. The next point I'd like to mention within the negotiations is the search of the options of win-win. That is, again, just to sit at the table with the vendor and to look at his costs at the margin and to search for the potential where you can manage his costs and expenses for it to impact the budget for us in the end of the day. There is a wonderful example from out of our practice when we, as the bank, we have a big network of departments, and we had the tender for the framework contract for 2 years for the supply of the uniform for our employees. Taking into consideration that we had more than 8,000 employees then, this contract was for about tens of millions of hryvnia. This was a very high budget. So we sat at the table with the supplier and we could see that we would like to manage the budget and improve what we achieved as the outcome of all of those negotiations. And we had the common idea, we gave birth to the idea as an alternative to the discount. We had a longer conversation and had a common idea as an option to consider that the fabric for these uniform should be procured in advance, the whole volume of the 2-year perspective. So it would mean a huge one-time order for the supply of fabric in the Netherlands. So with such a condition, we went to bargain to the supplier and we achieved 30% discount for the fabric. And it was turned out to be the same effect for the budget of our procurement. So this story is not about how we press onto the supplier and he needs to deteriorate the quality, not to use the margin. This is the story on how we are searching the win-win options for the win-win options when the business for us as the both sides is still profitable, but still we get such a mutual use of this project. Then I would like to tell how it is sensible to act. I really like to use this tool, procuring services. Maybe you've heard about the rule in SUMO of the procurement. When you accept supplier's offer, use your own conditions. A very nice example here could be, as I already mentioned, the services, especially in the creative marketing world, which is not that tangible. I mean that saving is not only money. And when we procure services, I don't speak about all of the categories which concern the services, but still it is very inherent to the procurement of the services, there is some sense to take the price of the procurer, but repackage the feeling of the offer, including there some of the benefits, additional tricks, some of the conditions of the payment, or decreasing the terms to knowing that they can strengthen the team and so on. So to have the project of the budget of the project as the constant point, but to get an additional value taking part in the services provision for you as an organization. This is a very nice rule for the services provision. And here, as the savings, I can also share such a wonderful tool as salami rule. Maybe you've also heard about it and you're using it as well. It is the tool which allows to achieve a wonderful price for the necessary volume in the following way. You come into the supplier and you don't announce the volume. For instance, you need 1,000 of laptops. You begin the request for the price for 300 laptops per unit, and then you cut your own salami. What's the price per unit if I buy 400? What's the price per unit if I take 500 of laptops? And when you come to the necessary number or amount, then the price per unit will be to a certain extent lower than in the offer which would be given by the supplier if you announced this volume at once. This is not a strategic tool, it's more of a tactical tool, but I decided to mention about it as the tool from the practice which you can incorporate in the different options when you conduct negotiations where it's important to get some savings. The next part I'd like to mention is the partnership. For me, this is the zone where we should contribute, we should invest our own resource most of all, because for me, this is the platform which builds the efficient function of procurement, of the business and all the rest. As the strong and reliable partner, which has the efficient and cool relations, both from the personal and business point of view, is really the basics, the foundation which you build the efficiency of procurement on. Vendor management, the system of vendor management system, if you haven't introduced it in your departments, I do recommend you please take those activities and use them. This could be a regular assessment and segmenting of the suppliers. For instance, we are doing annually from the perspective of the risks and migration for our other suppliers' budget and other important parameters. And according to the outcomes of this assessment, we develop the plan of actions, plan of activities, where and in what direction we need to work more with the supplier to develop our cooperation and interactions. I think that for the professionals in the procurement, and for those who are taking part in this event, the notion of raiding the supplier is not working. I would replace it for cost sharing. The tools which I mentioned a bit and which I meant when we were speaking about savings. You shouldn't have the unfair price for the supplier, because in the end of the day, you get either the bad product or a so-called dead supplier, because this is how you're killing his or her business. The business and cooperation should be profitable for both sides, and it's rather important. This true value of the buyer is that you are creating and searching for those common benefits from your cooperation. So maybe here as an example, as a case, I can mention the case with one of our suppliers who supplied us products, distributing it to all of the departments of the bank. And we understood that in his service for us, there is a huge logistics component. And as this supplier does the same for other organizations, we understood that we are not the only client and customer with such a logistics request. So it was not the only option of ours, not the only supplier with the request to get the products throughout the departments of the bank. What did we invent? We initiated the negotiations about the merging of our needs in logistics and searching for the logistics provider who would take into account the aggregated needs, could provide us the better service and the better conditions, the better offer to provide it to the organizations which have this consolidated volume. As for the partners, of course, you need to develop them. And I'm happy to understand that we as a bank have more than one example like this. Then out of one startup, the partner was growing and developing in cooperation with us and was transformed into a powerful provider at the market. And of course, when we are speaking about the developing of partners, we should consolidate the volumes and give more business to it. As an example, I can tell about our supplier of stationery, who provided stationery to all of the departments of the bank. And simultaneously, the bank had a need to bring out the advertisement products. We aggregated the needs and we accredited the supplier to bring out the ad products. It was the development of business for this supplier and the increase of the volume of cooperation with us. And for us, it was a kind of synergy, a reliable and happy partner, satisfied partner who got the bigger part of the pie. You need not avoid long-term cooperation and relations in the community of procurers, and in some of the discussions in different organizations I can hear that some of the companies are focused upon providing the tender procedure for each of the activities. Undoubtedly, it is really resource taking for the company, especially considering the wasted time of the expert. But in the context of the partnership, it is so important not to be afraid to let the partner cooperate for the long term, to get all the stages of turbulence, migration to the new business, creation of the relations, and also to give the opportunity for the partner to consider the certain time to invest into this cooperation, this resource. Then, under the umbrella of what we are speaking about, the development of the partner, we should also speak that we should offer new areas for business, new zones for development. And here, as an example out of our practice, we had a wonderful partner who produced advertisement constructions, but the bank needs were broader. We needed the production, the manufacturing of those constructions, and the paperwork, and the monitoring of those constructions, and their maintenance, and all of that was done by 4 different suppliers. So we created for that supplier, we developed it to merge all of those needs. It was something like new business for him, because in lots of business areas he did not have experience, but we supported him, and now we have a very reliable provider, and we simplified the administering of those spheres for ourselves through such a window. Still, considering what I mentioned, it is worth keeping your supplier in a good shape. We mean that he or she should feel the competitive environment, he shouldn't relax. So the recommendations which I can give here, they should be checked and rechecked. We should update the relevance of the price after some period of time. We should use the reserve supplier, and for some separate projects, we can involve the market to look at the fresh blood available, and for the acting supplier to feel in shape and to be afraid to lose his customer. Here we have several cases when it happened. I think that you're using at your place as well. It's just important to introduce this component of the good shape, not to create distress out of stress, and not to destroy the developed components of relations. And the last, but still a very important point, what I'd like to mention, you should always be fair and open, not to be afraid to provide feedback. What I mean, if you just need trivially to recheck the price, you should openly speak about the reason of your request to the supplier. You should be open whether this is the tender request or just information which you need from him or her. Besides that, you need to understand that during the tender procedures, the suppliers are spending their resources, they invest into it to form the offer. So it is so important to be open, providing feedback to the market about the reasons of this or that choice according to the outcomes of the tender. Let us move on. A couple of words about efficiency. This is about stakeholders. This is about the internal customers. This is an endless story of relations, which is a very important component. How we look like in the eyes of the organization, how we act. We need to be active to know which plans your businesses have, which tasks they have to provide, and also we need to provide meetings, status meetings, to provide information, some of the shared reports or files to be aware. We need to be aware what is taking place among our internal customers. The second life hack, we need to be out of the box and not to be afraid to do more than it should be done by the buyer. As an example, I took part, I used to be a project manager in a very interesting project on the creation of intranet. That's internal internet for the employees of the bank. By the way, recently the Facebook told that our intranet got some world award about its interface. But what's important about it, it was not that simple, especially considering that we always have operational tasks and strategic tasks. It is important to provide some time to get out of the box and to delve deeper into the world of the internal customer, not to be afraid to do more. Do not exist for the sake of the procedures. The procurement is rather regulated zone, still simplify it as much as possible to have some of the hygiene requirements for the transparency compliance requirements. Undoubtedly, we are all changing. We are living in the change epoch, and I'm not saying anything new in that. Be open for the experiments and transformation of the classical tender procedures, the testing, the proof of concept, white papers, etc. I'm just naming some of the names of different new activities which have place at the market. Undoubtedly, if we buy something on a regular basis or operationally, there is no potential here or necessity to make something different out of the classical tender. But if we speak about the new product which needs to be started, which we don't know them ourselves, just to make this product into the classical procurement procedures is not that simple. Undoubtedly, we should get to the internal customers for the expertise, because the expertise is what we are conceded from the buyers, and our task is to become the expert in the sphere where we are conducting the project as soon as possible. So try to use the expertise of the market to grow with your expertise and knowledge about the project. Bureaucracy fight, kill bill simplification. Different companies have different names for it, and I can say about my organization that we dealt about it. Kill all of the bills who take your resource and have your resource only for the important points, which can really add some value to the outcome and for the sake of what you're doing, all of that. And undoubtedly, when we speak about the relations with the internal customer, you should measure their customers' experience and how they see you. We do that in the format of the short surveys and in the outcome of each of the project. And this is a very useful experience for us to become better and to see ourselves objectively, to assess ourselves. As for transparency, undoubtedly, this is the request which is more from our controllers, the compliance services, the auditors. I may say that the more automated you are, the easier it is and the shorter it is, the dialogue is with our controllers. Undoubtedly, ERP platforms, secured of the tender procedures, transparent automated tools of procurement is what helps to get rid of lots of the issues which always used to be sensitive in the function of the procurement in the organization. Undoubtedly, you need to be a professional in the part of your regulations and documents and papers and regulations of the work of procurement. So I consider that the role of the process manager in the procurement is the key role. I really recommend you to implement it in your team. If you still don't have such a role, work with your policies. That should be a live, relevant document, not just something dusted, which we are referring for centuries and which is not working in life. What you do daily in your work, that should be found in your documents. Besides that, I am for perception of compliance as our partners and our advisors. So there's some sense to be active and to get some of the advice from them when you can see some sensitive case and there is some point to recommend or to have some advice with them and to equalize your conditions with them. And it really impacts to create reliable and trustful relations with this organization. Besides that, there is some sense to have constructive criticism and healthy discussion. It's always sensible, even if it's your opponent of compliance. So take whatever you can take. And as for all the rest, communicate and don't be afraid to express counter arguments. There were lots of stories in our practice when the dialogue with compliance was transformed into a different vision of the outcomes of our work than what compliance came to us with in the beginning. And as for risk management, here, again, vendor management is everything to us, because I consider that risk management issues is originated from how you created relations in a proper and healthy way with your suppliers. Nice partners, low risks. Besides that, definitely, you shouldn't delegate and shift all the risks to supplier. You should think together how to avoid the risk, or at least to mitigate, to decrease it. As for the COVID lessons, my speech was created more without separation on pre-COVID or post-COVID times, because we are in this period for 18 months already. And from the perspective of the business, it should grow from the urgent situation into our new normality. So I'm sure that we, as the professionals and experts who are working for lots of years, we've had many special crises, though this one was very peculiar. But as for business continuity, I think that under the conditions of coronavirus, we looked at this aspect of the business in a different way. I may say out of my own practice that we had two resource exercises. First, we separated critical services, the services which we are provided, and we monitored on a regular basis the status of the suppliers, whether they are capable to provide our services continuously under the conditions of COVID. We developed the backup options and we're always in touch with them. And the second exercise is more of the critical goods. That's where we paid attention to our stocks and we began to plan them in the long-term perspective. So concluding and coming closer to the end of my speech, what I wanted to tell you still, the value of the procurement is in the costs or in the savings or beyond, much more. I would like to sum it up that when we are focused only on costs, only on savings, we lose partnerships, because the more we squeeze the supplier, the more complicated is to create relations for the long-term perspective with them. We decrease the quality because the supplier begins to save on the expenses, deteriorating the quality or saving on the logistics, which can lead to the decrease of the lead time, increase of the lead time. And also it impacts the transparency of the processes, as mostly if we are focused on just the price or the cost, this is how we violate the equal conditions for the participants of the tender procedure, because very often the tender has taken place and some people are coming at the post-final stage and they offer the better price. If we focus on the better price only, then whatever we have built from the perspective of the transparency will be ruined. And undoubtedly, from the perspective of the risk management, the risks of the delays, continuity of the business and all the rest are increasing as well. I guess these are the main points I'd like to share with you. I will be happy to answer your questions, or maybe you've got any comments, because I will be happy to get some new lessons from this meeting as well. Thank you so much for your attention. Oleksandra, thank you so much for such an interesting and full of sense presentation that you've shared your cases and how you solve the current complicated tasks, pre-COVID and COVID ones. There are two questions in the chat. I will read them out loud for them to be interpreted. And I do hope you will be able to answer them. The first question is, which complications did you face during the COVID trying to provide value of the procurement in the bank? And did it differ from the previous projects during the pre-COVID times? Were there some difference? Maybe some complications or vice versa, something has simplified? And the second question is about the terminology. What is POC, WP? Could you tell about those request types in more details, but in a nutshell, please, because we're out of time. Yes, I can see that we are out of timing. Thank you, colleagues, for your questions. As for the complications which we faced during the coronavirus period, from the perspective of the value of the procurement during the COVID, I may say that it grew organically, because really we've become a very popular function as for our stakeholders, both from the critical services and provision of the continuity, and also from the planning of the stocks. But here, the main thing I'd like to mention is that both during the pre-COVID times and now, we as the function were deeply incorporated into the business processes of the bank. It was not another milestone where we could be considered in a different way or we could prove anything additionally to our stakeholders. I would just say it was just an additional piece of work, kind of a new experience, definitely complicated but interesting times where we could monitor additionally and provide continuity of what I told you about. As for the second question, POC is proof of concept. That is the similar thing to MVP. That is the part of the test of some service, of some work, when we can look at the providers in the process of work from the perspective of their performance, how they perform their tasks, and consequently to take the decision whether we launch the full-scale project with him or not. As for the procurement, and from the perspective of the competition using this tool, we can take POC and offer it to several participants of the tender procedure, 2-3 of them shortlist according to the outcomes of the tender. For this stage, for some complicated services and projects, for us to be able to be sure that those suppliers are capable to provide wonderful outcomes during the whole project and to look at their capacities in this practice. As for white paper, WP, this is the term which is just white paper, literally. This is the announcement, is this the invitation to the market, less formal than the tender, at the stage of the market studies, when we are in a totally new product development, and we as the organization, as the customer, we cannot understand the precise requirements for the product because we don't know much about it. It's something new, innovative, and it's a kind of a format which is very uncertain, where we invite the market and the experts of the market to shape the innovative product. Thank you so much. Thank you. There is one more question. Do you conduct surveying of the main of your suppliers, and which criteria you use for that surveying? If you mean when you say surveying within the vendor management, then it is done just internally, the whole process of assessment, and we conduct it together with the initiator, the stakeholder. This is kind of the overall activity of a stakeholder and the procurement to assess according to the key parameters which I listed above. That is the complications of the migration to a different supplier, the budget which was spent for the supplier during the previous year, and also main parameters, whether it's high quality enough or not. And I would say it is done with the aim to segment the supplier, to understand his or her role in the organization and to understand how to work with him further on to improve the interaction. But if we speak about the feedback, that is surveying with the aim to get feedback, And then maybe such a formal point as surveying is not used, but within the activities with the suppliers, of course, we have roundtables and vendor days, different meetings and status meetings, and many other different channels with the help of which we could share this or that information with the suppliers. Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for the questions. We are out of our timing already. I would like to express my gratitude to all of the participants who survived till the end of this session. And I would like to thank you that you've stayed with us. I'd like to remind that we are conducting our event and we will conduct them in autumn. The next one will be done on the 16th of September. Please follow all of our announcements. Now we are all getting a kind of a holiday and August relaxation. So we do invite you to our next topics and next discussions. I would also like to remind you that you can follow all of the news, all of the announcements at the channel of Zakupivli News, Procurement News. I will send you the information in the chat, which you can copy, and you can be aware about all of the events which we are conducting, and also you can follow, if you subscribe the channel and our pages, you will get all the emails. Stephen, any of the concluding words?
Only to thank our amazing speakers and of course to thank you, Marina, and to thank our magic interpreters as always, and obviously for the participants. So I really enjoyed it. I think it's very enlightening. So thank you very much.
Всем спасибо.
Everybody, thank you so much and have a successful procurement and value which you bring to your companies. Meet you soon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.